What's up YouTube? Today's video is going to be very different from what I usually post on this channel. If you just came for the big updates and the big news, I basically just have 3 big announcements to make and I'll give them to you right away. The first one, the biggest one, is that I will be taking a long break from content creation starting very soon. Probably in June I will stop posting content regularly, and that is because I will be returning back to my medicine studies to university in summer or autumn. So that means there's not going to be any more content, at least not any more regular content for the rest of the year, maybe even for the next 2 years that it takes me to finish my medicine studies. And I'm not quite sure yet what I will do afterwards, if I will get back to content creation, if I do it full-time or half-time, or if I won't find time for it at all. So I don't want to make any false promises, and I will be saying goodbye for at least a long while. Second big announcement, I will be doing a charity subathon starting this Saturday, the 13th of May at noon Central European time. I will try to raise money for The Life You Can Save, an effective altruism organization, and this will be streamed exclusively on Twitch, and it will probably last a couple of days if everything goes well. So feel free to swing by if you just want to view or if you actually want to contribute or donate something. Everything is appreciated. I will give more details on that event a bit later on in this video. But before that, the third big announcement that I want to do is that I will be hosting a coaching seminar soon. This has been a long time in the making, and I believe this will be an absolute coaching masterclass on Marvel Snap. I will do that alongside Dan, the writer for Marvel Snap Zone, who is also doing their meta tier lists. He will be covering the most important card game aspects of Marvel Snap, but I will focus on the most important game theory topics and the wagering and poker part of Marvel Snap. It will be a roughly 4 to 5 hours interactive classroom session, and it will be priced at 50 buckaroos per person, and it will be held on Sunday the 28th of May at 5 p.m. Central European time. If you're interested in taking your Marvel Snap game to the next level and you want to find more infos, I will leave a link to a Discord server specifically dedicated for this seminar in the comments and the video description. And that is it. Those were the big announcements of the video. The rest of this is going to be a bit more of a podcast style, me just kind of talking. No fancy cuts and edits, but I just want to talk about some stuff that has been on my mind for a long time. And some topics that I want to cover is how I got into competing in card games and content creation in the first place, then why I left Legends of Runeterra. A lot of people have been asking me that and bugging me about that, and I never really answered the questions in full detail. Then naturally why I transitioned to Marvel Snap, and maybe also touch up on what content plans I have, what events I have planned, and last of all I also want to ask you at home, the viewers, for some support. And the reason why I'm coming up with this right now is that I got a bit sentimental recently. I've had some pretty cool goals as a content creator. 25,000 subs on YouTube. I'm pretty close to 20,000 on Twitch. And it also kind of just made me reflect on my journey as a player and as a content creator. And out of curiosity, I also did some quick maths recently, and I calculated all of the watch time that I had across Twitch and YouTube together. And I realized that you crazy people have been watching me for 1.4 million hours already. And that is just on my 2 channels. That means 160 years of total watch time, or more or less 6 times my total lifespan so far. And that is a very humbling number to look at. And it did make me aware of the impact that I might have on the world or on some other people's lives. And that's why I thought this would be a good opportunity to share a bit more about my own personal life story, just for those who are interested, or maybe as some inspiration for some of you who might be trying to make it as a card game player, as a content creator, or anything similar. And I gotta admit that even after 3 years of doing this full time, it still feels a bit odd to me to talk to a camera directly without live chat present or people to interact with. But okay, I'll try to do my best. The rest of this video is mostly just gonna be me freestyle talking. I just have a couple of pointers prepared. You might have noticed me looking at the screen a couple of times. I just prepared some topics that I want to make sure that I cover, but most of this will just be off the top of my head. So I think to fully understand my journey and why I chose the path that I did, we need to go all the way back. And don't worry, I won't bore you with a lot of backstory, childhood stories and whatever. And I think one important thing that you need to know is that I grew up in a super competitive environment. My parents both migrated to Germany right before I was born, and both of them very much have that hustling immigrants mentality. Everything was always about performance and results, about trying to achieve things, being the best at something, perfectionism, and I was constantly surrounded by all that growing up. It also didn't help that I had a brother around my age who was also super hyper competitive. So we both kind of ended up the same way, growing up as hyper competitive kids and teenagers. And naturally, we also were interested in competing in hobbies. So whatever sport we did, whatever game we played, we always tried to min-max everything. We always tried to win as much as possible. Maybe you can imagine how horrible board game nights and Monopoly was. But anyways, I was always drawn towards competing, and especially towards hobbies of which you could make a living competing. So it was a childhood dream of mine to turn a hobby, a competitive hobby, into a reality, into a job. And I did start playing video games pretty early as a kid, good old Game Boy Color with Pokemon Red, I think. But esports and so on didn't exist back then. My first real thing was sports. I went pretty hardcore on basketball, so did my brother. We really pushed each other to get better and better. And that was my first dream to go pro at, but a ton of injuries kind of kept me from pursuing that. And during one of those long and big injuries, I actually got my first glance into pro gaming. So I was like 14 or 15, and all of a sudden I had a ton of time available because I didn't go to basketball practice anymore. I couldn't really run. I tried grinding a video game called Bloodline Champions back in the days, and I realized that I shot up in ranks pretty quickly, and very soon I was on top of multiple leaderboards in solo ladder as well as 2-on-2 and 3-on-3. And it was a very cool experience. I enjoyed it a lot. There wasn't really much money there. There were just a couple of maybe couple $100 tournaments. And even though we were the second best team worldwide for quite a while, it wasn't really anything you could make a living of. That was at the very start of the inception of esports, basically. But one cool opportunity that it gave me is that I had the chance to play at the first World Championship at DreamHack Summer 2011, I think it was. And coincidentally, that was the same DreamHack where the first League of Legends World Championship ever was held. I was basically there at the birth of esports, and it was an unbelievably cool experience for a teenager like me. Meeting all of these players that you only saw on big streams and in big tournaments before. And not only some of the big names from League of Legends, like Reginald, for example, but also some world-class StarCraft players, IMMC, the best Quake players on Earth, Rafa and Cypher. Seeing all these legends got me very excited about the concept of esports and that as a potential career maybe at some point. But unfortunately, the game I played died down pretty quickly. It just couldn't hold its player base, and I also had to leave because I was going abroad for a year for school. So with a heavy heart, I had to leave my little gaming career behind. But it was still very inspiring to see what the other players from Bloodline Champions have accomplished, the ones that stuck in esports, because there were some huge names in there. Just to name drop a few. That DreamHack tournament was actually won by Hafu, who is now one of the biggest content creators across Twitch and YouTube. The first round of the tournament we won against Mithy's team. Mithy would go on to become one of the best League of Legends supports worldwide and got second place at the World Championship with G2 Esports. The main shoutcaster for our tournament was Semler, who would go on to be one of the biggest Counter-Strike broadcasters of all time. And we eventually got kicked out of the tournament by Chips Hyen's team, who would become one of the best Overwatch players worldwide. So even though my own gaming career got put on hold, it was very inspiring to see these other players make it and basically live the dream. And it was also quite the confidence booster that I was able to compete and hang with all of these players in Bloodline Champions. But for the next few years, I was only gaming casually on the side. I never really got into competing anymore. But I did discover poker for myself. And that was kind of a cool middle ground to turn my dream into somewhat of a reality, because it was a game, a fairly interesting game, that you could make a living of fairly easily. So the beautiful thing about poker is that to make money there, you don't have to be one of the best players worldwide, but you just have to be above average. You have to be above average at the table that you're sitting at, and you will be profitable in the long run. So I picked that up when I turned 18 towards the end of my school time. And then I got into university, decided to study medicine. And I gotta admit, I kind of did it because I didn't really know what else to do. And now don't get me wrong, I do like medicine. I especially like the psychology part of it and helping people, understanding people. I was still most interested in competitive stuff and maybe finding a hobby that I could turn into a job. But I didn't really like poker enough to do it full time and turn it into a career. I just didn't think the game was fun enough. And I didn't really have anything else on the horizon, like no sport or no game or no hobby. And at the same time, I should mention my parents absolutely hated me and my brother gaming and spending so much time on it. They always made us think that we were wasting our time and that we should spend it on something more meaningful. I get back around to that later on, actually. But yeah, just to stick with the storyline. So for the next 5 years or so, I was mostly studying medicine, kind of playing some poker on the side, some live cash game actions in the casinos. And then all of a sudden COVID hit, right? During my hospital internship. All of the studies got cancelled. I also couldn't go to the casino and play poker anymore. Full on lockdown. I was currently in Spain doing Erasmus, and I had a ton of time in a little room and didn't know what to do. And that was when, right around the time when Legends of Runeterra came out, and I completely binged that game in the beginning. I got into the game in open beta and I completely loved it. This was finally a game that had a lot of depth and complexity, and a lot of the poker skills were applicable, but it was much more fun than poker. I could spend countless hours without a problem trying to improve at this game. And another big thing is, this was backed by Riot Games. And keep in mind that I've kind of witnessed and followed the inception of esports, and I had some friends that did very well in Riot Games titles. So I actually thought this could work, because I knew of some Hearthstone and Magic the Gathering pro circuits. There were quite a few people who could make a consistent living off it. I had enough motivation to try and become the very best player that I could become. And it did work out quite successfully. I got into the top ladder ranks pretty quickly, and then I would just start to play all of the community tournaments that were available. On Europe's time zone, NA time zone didn't matter because I was in COVID lockdown anyway. And I would pretty much tear through these tournaments and put up some pretty absurd numbers. I've set up a lot of records for tournament wins, win rate percentage, top cut percentage. And in the early days of Legends of Runeterra, I was widely regarded one of the best or the best player in the game worldwide. You could say that I finally got there, kind of, right? Turned the dream into a reality. And now you might be asking yourself, then why did I quit Legends of Runeterra? Why did I stop competing at the highest level? And this is where the disillusionment kind of began, the reality check. Because I kind of thought that being the best at something, being the best worldwide at something, would be somewhat self-sufficient. Especially if it's a big card game like Hearthstone and Magic the Gathering. Some other people did it before, right? And this one is backed by Riot Games. But unfortunately, that was not the reality. I kind of covered this topic already a while ago in a twit-longer that I currently have open right here. And I read through it before recording this video again. I will link it in the description for those of you who want to read it. It's about 2 years old already. But yeah, I'll just give a very rough summary on what it's about. It was called A Thing or Two About Competing in Card Games, and it's kind of just was this reality check that I had, with which I was hoping to also give other people maybe a more realistic image of what the chances of making it as a card game competitor actually are. And yeah, the big down points and the big issues were basically Riot Games and a lot of these other big game studios and organizers are kind of clickbaiting people into believing that it would be possible to make a living off their tournaments. What exactly do I mean by that? Most of these tournaments were constructed in a way that they would be very inclusive, that a large part of the player base could somehow participate in them, and they made a very big clickbaity first prize, giving people the dream oh, this could be you could win this. But then the prize drops would be pretty humongous. Second place would already earn much less, and then third and fourth much less, and everything beyond that was barely even worth mentioning. And since there is a ton of variance in card games, even if you are by far the best player worldwide, the most likely outcome is that you will not win those big tournaments and that you will not even make it into the top 4. At the same time, these big tournaments only happened once every couple of months. World Championship is only once each year. It's just not enough of an ecosystem to make a living off with which you can actually pay bills. You'd need to get incredibly lucky, even if you are the best player worldwide, to win one of those huge tournaments right away. At the same time, what really pissed me off is that Riot Games and many of these other studios are marketing these events as if they were the apex of competition, actual quote from Riot Games, and that the best would always prevail and blah blah, form their glory and get rewarded with glorious prizes and all that. And even I kind of fell for that clickbait for a while. Even though I kind of realized that the tournaments had shitty structures right away. I at least believed in the dream that the ecosystem and tournament system would keep improving and that eventually there would be enough space to make a living off. However, it never happened. The player base actually declined, and so did the competitive structure. And I think by now I'm just disillusioned enough to realize that card games are just such a niche genre that there's not enough demand and not enough entertainment value in having these big tournaments with big prize pools, because they don't pull as many viewers and sponsors. So I kind of gave up that dream and hung up my gloves to become a pure competitive pro gamer, so a pure card game pro pretty quickly. And yeah, those were the key points from that twitlonger, from that article. But there were a few more points that kind of came up over time and that I haven't ever mentioned yet. And those are directed at you. If you are one of those people who wants to know, why did I quit Legends of Runeterra? Why did I quit competing in general? Here are a few more points from my own personal experience. First of all, I already mentioned there is a monetary lack of value in competing. But I will also say it wasn't just monetary. At least for me, it felt like it was not just a monetary lack of value. So once you get to the very top, once you achieved like such a big goal that you have been working on for so long, it's kind of empty up there. So first of all, you don't really have that drive anymore to keep pushing yourself to become better. And at the same time, not many people care if you are the best player in the world, or if someone else is the best player in the world, or if you are just the 20th best player in the world. I think for a long time I had this very like self-entitled idea that a lot of people would care, or maybe should care, especially if they play that game, who is sitting at the top of it. But I personally realized over time that the only real value that you create in competing is what you provide to other people. So that can be entertainment value. For example, all of the NBA or any other major sports league just gives people a reason to cheer for or a team to identify with. Or educational value you create just because people watch you and want to improve themselves and learn something from you. And in my opinion, purely competing in online CCGs does neither of the two. You don't really create a lot of entertainment value because only very few people are watching. And it's also not really very educational because you're not explaining your thought process, and most of the viewers would not even understand why you are making the plays that you're making. And it took me a long time to realize this, but I think that's the main reason why I felt more fulfilled doing content creation as well as coaching and educational content, right? Because there I was actually doing both of those things. I was entertaining people and brightening their days maybe with deck gameplay videos, and at the same time teaching them, helping them reach their personal goals, but also just improve their decision-making process and their rational thinking, working with probabilities and everything else. And this is where I want to touch up again on what I mentioned earlier on about my parents telling me that I was wasting my time with video games, and society also kind of telling me that I would be wasting my time with video games. And I never really thought that I was wasting my time, but I think because I was just surrounded by it so much, by that opinion, I started to kind of feel that way. And I think I felt the need to validate myself by becoming the best at something just to prove people wrong, or by making a living of something just to prove people wrong that I'm not wasting my time. Like I said earlier on, I did not find that validation when I felt like I was the best player in the world. It was kind of empty up there. But I did find it more and more over time after realizing how many people I am actually affecting or touching in their lives, even if it's just on a recreational base, even if it's just making some people laugh for a second, or helping someone hit a silly rank goal in a children's mobile game. But that, at least to me, felt more fulfilling than actually being at the top of a game, like rank-wise and competition-wise. And that's why I was so sentimental looking at the numbers that I mentioned earlier on with all of the watch time that has compounded over the last 3 years. And I do want to highlight that all of this has just been my personal experience, right? Maybe it would be completely different for you. Maybe it would feel completely different for you. But I really wanted to share that point of view to maybe give people a bit more of a realistic point of view of what competing in card games often looks like. There are still more reasons why I quit Legends of Runeterra. I just want to point them out very quickly for those of you who do want to know. Because even as a content creator, coach, and like semi-competitive player, I had a lot of bad experiences in the next year or so after I wrote that article. So the first big thing was the first World's Championship of Legends of Runeterra, for which I qualified qualified with, I think, the most qualification points across all 3 qualification methods. So I was one of the favorites going into that tournament. But they announced the format just a couple of weeks before the actual event. They moved the qualifier, the open play-in date, like a few days before the date was supposed to happen. A lot of people had to cancel their vacations. They couldn't play. It was a full-on fiasco. And some people couldn't play, although they didn't do anything wrong. Some deck lists were leaked before the tournament. And the worst thing of all was that the format for the play-in tournament was incredibly atrocious again. It was just one single double elimination bracket to cut from 64 to 4 or 5 players depending on the region you're in. That means your whole year of preparation, your whole year of work basically boils down to one double elimination bracket and a shit ton of RNG. On top of that, that play-in tournament wasn't even streamed or covered or anything else. And you would not get any share of the prize pool unless you made it into the final 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players, depending on which region you're in. So most of the very, very good and very deserving players dropped out in that double elimination tournament, including me, unfortunately. And then the top 16 happened, and it was actually a banger of a tournament. It was incredibly good. And this is where I get back to the whole clickbait thing. The tournament was marketed as a huge success simply for marketing reasons, but I never got the feeling that Riot really cared about the actual players behind it and ensuring that good players actually get good placements in tournaments. So as a competitor, I always felt very replaceable. Like, it doesn't really matter who gets which seed at the tournament, who places first, second, or third, or fourth, because someone eventually will. And the experiences got a bit worse over time. Like, we could already feel that the player base and prize pools and frequency of tournaments was declining. But I kept on at least playing the big ones. I still had very, very good results. I still think I hold a lot of records for best win rates in tournaments and so on. And then at one of the big seasonal tournaments, one thing happened that tilted me out of my mind. We were already on the top 16, I think, of a 1024 player tournament. And the big pay jump started happening. And I played against a very good player in a very even matchup. And I started to notice that the time for the series was running a bit low and we would probably not end up finishing in time. So I started to play with the clock in mind and made sure I was always a bit of time ahead of my opponent. And I never gave my opponent the opportunity to catch up on time. And just as I was about to win on time, like a minute or so before the timer ran out, the timer glitched, it bugged and gave my opponent extra time. And I didn't even realize it at that moment. Time ran out and all of a sudden it said that I lost. And I immediately rewatched the footage and it was obvious, like it was a chess clock timer. So they just got random time out of nowhere added to their time bank. And I was furious. I immediately started a shitstorm on Twitter. I reached out to as many Riot people as I could because the tournament was automatically run. It just moved on. And that player actually would go on to win the tournament and $10,000, while I got dropped out for 150. Keep in mind, the pay jumps were ridiculously enormous. And I did some calculations looking at my lineup, the rest of the field, and on average, I lost or didn't win about $5,000 there that I would have otherwise won. So I did not only feel robbed as a player, as a competitive spirit, but also it was a significant part of my income at that time. I was reliant on these tournament winnings. And the worst thing is that no one actually answered me. I got some likes on Twitter from some of the game developers. I realized they at least noticed the problem, but no one would tell me anything or give me any significant communication. And so I kind of had to handle my frustration on my own. The players were really nice. Like, even the guy that won against me sincerely apologized, realized it was a glitch, but it was absolutely not his fault. What really triggered me about the situation was feeling kind of ignored or left hanging. And that actually happened a lot with Riot Games in a lot of situations. I ended up very often not really feeling appreciated by them, and everything felt very impersonal. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not aiming this at anyone specifically, because every person I actually interacted with was absolutely lovely and amazing. And I do very much appreciate all of the opportunities and offers that they gave me. It was just that working with them as a company could often be a nightmare, because whenever you approach them with an issue, it seemed like no one felt responsible for it. Everyone was just saying, let me relay that to the other team. Let me ask the other department. Let me ask my boss. Let me ask this and that. And it often felt like that company didn't really appreciate you as a player, as a person, not even as a competitor, but just for the value that you provide to them. So kind of just as a hype or a marketing tool or as a broadcast asset. And some other examples of this are that I often felt left out, for example, in some promotional events. I applied multiple times to the League Partner Program. I never got accepted because it's handled in a super weird way in Germany. I never got the fist bump card back even that they gave out to almost everyone who did anything related to the game like ever. And I also never received one of those really cool jackets that they sent out as a promotion for the last World Championship, although back then I was still mostly active in the game. And to get back to a previous topic, like a few months or half a year after that timer fiasco happened, the timer glitch, I actually did get a bit of closure in that regard. And that was that one of the engineers tweeted out that it was in fact a glitch and they fixed it. I never heard any public statement. I never even heard anything as much as a sorry. Like for months, people were calling me an entitled crybaby and a hypocrite, and that it was my internet connection that caused the timer to glitch out and not an actual bug in the game, that it was my fault. And I guess they did fix the problem. Good to know, like half a year later. But again, it just comes back to not really feeling appreciated at all. And you know, I will admit, like maybe I was too entitled in all of these regards. Maybe I was expecting too much or to be treated too specially. All of those experiences kind of just piled up and left a worse and worse taste in my mouth. And those were the real reasons why I left Legends of Runeterra. Like, don't get me wrong, I still love the game. I would totally be down to play it again. But there were a lot of reasons that kind of drove me away. And on top of that, there were just less and less opportunities as a content creator and less demand in coaching. So if those things re-emerge, I would totally be down to get back into Legends of Runeterra, check it out again. But when Marvel Snap released, it was the exact opposite. It had amazing opportunities as a content creator as well as a coach. The viewership was very high from the get-go, and I'm still not sure why, but people just love coaching in Marvel Snap, and a lot of people approached me about it. So it was just a very natural business decision to move over to Marvel Snap. At the same time, I was kind of burnt out from lore and the game mechanics after that has been the main focus of my life for like 2.5 years, and Snap felt like a refreshing take on the genre and just a refreshing game to play in general. And I'm not saying that Marvel Snap is a better game than Legends of Runeterra. They're very, very different in what they do. I just feel better about Marvel Snap right now, and that's why I have decided to stick with it so far. And it has been more successful in regards to content as well as coaching. And yeah, here we are. That's basically how I got to where I am right now. If there's one more thing that I want to mention as advice to people who maybe think about getting into the same career path, even for content creation and coaching, it's a full-on grind. It actually takes insane amounts of time to stay up to date in a niche like card games, to stay relevant and to appease the algorithms. You really need to be posting daily or almost daily, and you can't really take time off. If you take a few days off, the algorithm is already going to dislike you. If you take a longer vacation or you're sick for a longer time, you're going to lose a significant chunk of your audience and therefore your livelihood and your income. And I think people often underestimate this. They think something like content creation and YouTubing is very easy and they don't take it very seriously. But I will say it requires a ridiculous amount of commitment and dedication. And if you really enjoy this, that is fine, because much of the time you spend in this will not really feel like work. But there is also a very fine line that you're walking between burning out and being fine. I'm seeing this in a lot of fellow colleagues and creators. I have experienced that a couple of times myself. My big message here is, for most of us, it is a very demanding and a very constant occupation. So, all right, I hope this video isn't too long yet. Just a few final points that I want to mention. I already kind of talked about my plans for the future. There's only going to be about 1 month, maybe 1.5 of content left, but I do have some big stuff planned. Keep in mind that the charity subathon starts tomorrow on my Twitch stream, so the day after I post this video. It is a big passion project of mine, and I would love if you could swing by or contribute something yourself. The idea here is that I will start with a 12-hour stream, and every dollar you donate is gonna increase the stream timer by a few minutes. Every subscription or donation to my Twitch channel is also going to increase the timer. And besides holding a fundraiser, I will also donate a quarter of my earnings of that subathon to the life you can save. And the other big thing to keep in mind, the coaching seminar on the 28th of May in about 2 weeks. Keep in mind the Discord link is in the video description and in the comments. You'll find all of the relevant info there. And as promised, for the last part of this video, I want to ask you, the viewers at home, for some support. I usually don't like to do this. I don't really ask directly for help, but that also results in my channel not performing as well as it could. Let me give you some examples. Just I don't really ask for people to like, comment, subscribe, but that also means that 70% of my viewers are actually not subscribed to my Twitch channel. I don't really like to ask directly for donations or money contributions. I do always leave links in the chat and in video descriptions, but without asking directly, my revenue from these links is on average below $5 a month. And I think my channel overall only makes about a third or a quarter of what a channel of a similar size would usually make. So I do want to ask you for some support here. First of all, if you don't have a dime left over, you can still help out for free by liking, commenting this video, subscribing to the channel, and doing that on all other videos I post. Maybe also follow on Twitter, on Twitch, and so on. I know you're probably already sick of hearing this everywhere on every video, but it's only on every video because it actually works. This increases the channel's reach, it's better for the algorithms, and it makes it easier to bargain with sponsors and get some better pay. The other thing that you could do for free, if you do have Amazon Prime, you may or may not be aware that Twitch is also owned by Amazon, and your Amazon Prime subscription also includes a free Twitch Prime subscription to one streamer of your choice. You do need to manually renew this every month though, but if you have Amazon Prime, you can basically gift a streamer of your choice money for free. And if you do have a couple of bucks left over, the best way to support a content creator is actually through direct donations. And you could do so through my Ko-fi link, where you can metaphorically invite me to a coffee. Or you can subscribe to repeatedly do that on a monthly basis. Speaking of monthly basis, both YouTube memberships and Twitch subs are also good ways of supporting your streamer. Just keep in mind that Google and Amazon take a bit of the cut there. And last of all, if you do want to support me but would like to have something in return, again, I do offer coaching. If you want to improve at Marvel Snap, we can do a one-on-one coaching lesson, or you can join the seminar that is going to be happening in 2 weeks for a more price-efficient method. I know the one-on-one coaching is a bit pricey, but that's necessary to make up for all of the low-paid hours of content creation and streaming. And that's it. That's all of the selling out and asking for support that I will do. That's also it for this video. I covered all of the topics. Just one last thing I want to say. I do really appreciate the support, and whether you are just watching or you are helping out in other ways, it doesn't really matter. This is kind of a childhood dream that came true, and you're part of the reason why I can live it out. You are part of this childhood dream, even just by watching me play and talk. So thank you.